Legislature back in session. Vice Speaker Tony, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to move Bill 33-38 COR as amended by the Committee on Economic Investment, Military Buildup, Regional Relations, Technology, Regulatory Affairs, Justice, Elections, and Retirement, introduced by myself, Senator Duenas, Senator Speaker Blas, Senator Parkinson, Senator San Agustin, Senator Lujan, Senator Barnett, Senator Perez, Senator Matanani, Senator Muñoz Barnes, Senator Shelley Calvo, and this is an act to amend subsection 25.15A to 25.20A2 and subsection 25.10 of Chapter 25, Title 9, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the expansion of the elements for first and second degree criminal sexual conduct. I'd like to speak on the motion, please.
You can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill, if enacted, will increase the culpability of certain sex offenders who sexually assault crime victims who are 14 and 15 years of age, and applies the strictest penalties for these perpetrators. Mr. Speaker, Bill 33-38 COR as amended may appear complicated, but it's rather simple. It expands the list of perpetrators who take advantage of their positions of authority and sexually assault teens who are 14 and 15 years of age. Under Guam law, any person who sexually assaults a teenager who is 14 or 15 years of age commits the crime of third-degree criminal sexual conduct as a second-degree felony. As such, the minimum term of incarceration is 3 years. That term can be as low as 1 year for first-time offenders and may even be probation if the perpetrator qualifies under the Justice Safety Valve Act. Under current law, the crime becomes first or second degree criminal sexual conduct as a first degree felony if the victim and the perpetrator are related by blood or affinity, in other words, marriage, or are members of the same household. Under Guam law, the minimum penalty for a first degree felony is 5 years, and 15 years if the felony conviction is for the first degree criminal sexual conduct. Also, thanks to a law that I authored in the 36th Guam Legislature, the Justice Safety Valve Act does not apply to first or second degree criminal sexual conduct. This bill expands the list of perpetrators to include school personnel, such as teachers and school aides, child care or foster care providers, correctional facility workers, and those who are in a dating relationship with a member of the victim's household. The bill also expands the definition of affinity only for criminal sexual conduct to include a person in a dating relationship with one of the victim's parents. The dating relationship and affinity provisions of the bill were worded specifically to exclude Romeo and Juliet relationships. And that's the dating relationships where one or both of the individuals are under the age of 16. Guam's criminal sexual conduct law mirrors the law of the state of Michigan. The first and second degree criminal sexual conduct laws of Michigan already include the provisions that will be added by enactment of this bill. Unlike Michigan, Guam is community property state where common law unions are not recognized in Guam's affinity laws. Therefore, the need for the term dating relationship is needed to address perpetrators who are not legally married. The Office of the Attorney General strongly supported this bill during the public hearing, as Guam's children need the protections of our laws to ensure that their homes are safe and that would-be sex offenders do not abuse their positions of authority to victimize children. The committee made amendments to the bill based on the recommendations of the Office of the Attorney General to clarify relationships of affinity and to use federal law to create the Guam law definition of dating relationship. I ask and urge my colleague to support this legislation, which closes loopholes in Guam's first and second degree criminal sexual conduct. and I look forward to hearing the discussions with my colleagues on this piece of legislation. And I also probably would be proffering an amendment before I close, or when I close. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. On the bill, are there any? I will recognize the gentlelady from Pago Bay, okay? A ranking member?
Situ Smasi, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak and rise in support of bill number, excuse me, bill number 33-38 COR. And I want to thank the good sponsor of this legislation for giving me the opportunity to be part of his co-sponsorship. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, and in recognition of the large agenda we have over these next few days, I promise all my colleagues that my remarks on this bill will be very brief. I am a proud co-sponsor of this measure from my friend from Sinahanya because, Mr. Speaker, it reflects the heinous nature of these crimes against teens. Those who sexually abuse family members, students, or patients are among the most despicable. And I thank the author for proposing tougher penalties for those found guilty of these offenses. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that these criminals will be subject to longer prison sentences through this bill number 33-38, and I literally urge my colleagues to support this same effort, and knowing that as the good author talked about several of the provisions that are already in statute, like the Safety Valve Act and the Romeo and Juliet, I stand in full support of this measure. Sinamasi, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Gentlemen from Talafofo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of Bill 33-38. Having the second highest number of rapes in our community per capita in the nation is a statistic that we should have been more outraged and much more focused on wanting to change way before I got elected and standing here talking about this particular issue. Bill 33 is that change. Bill 33-38 is that policy that, Mr. Speaker, I believe will change the trajectory of this dangerous trend. Working in our sister branch of the judiciary of Guam, I spent hundreds of hours working with journalists chronicling the scores of unfortunate cases that needed this policy change back then. That was from 2017 to 2020. I was in the courtroom on so many different occasions. And during that time, it really was the #1 offense that was charged overall. For sure, the top misdemeanor in 2017. In 2019, family violence broke into the top 5 for charged felonies. In 2020, second-degree criminal sexual conduct, where the victim where the contact and the victim is under 14 years old, broke into the top 5 for charged felony offenses. Even after I left the judiciary, the trend just went up. In 2023, criminal jury trials for criminal sexual conduct cases was #1 that year with 10 trials. Mr. Speaker, 10 trials. Let that sink in for a bit. 10 victims, 10 unfortunate circumstances. This is just a glimpse into why Bill 33-38 has made it here to the Guam Congress building. Mr. Speaker, our young people have a tough time already trying to understand the world around them. Fiestas, church, school, places where they would think that they would be learning more about their culture, their faith, maybe about math, science, or reading. Victims questioning why. Good touch, bad touch. What about the other parts of just growing up? But no, adults, people that they thought were good, showing them a side of growing up well before that time that our society agrees that it is appropriate to do so. Many of the cases that I described a few moments ago were committed against young people, which the Office of the Attorney General told us in the public hearing for this particular bill that 80% for these first and second degree criminal sexual conduct cases were from a familial relationship. Bill 33-38 may not do much to keep the traumatic events of these CSE crimes from their heads, but it can do much to punish depraved individuals, very sick men and women. Victims of this crime have and will move forward, though sadly, many other victims will be hurt by this for the rest of their days. This bill, when enacted, will strengthen the CSE statute to be sure that on appeal, that such definitions as affinity are clear. Clarity and specificity. And I thank the author for the work on this and would ask the author that I be added as a co-author to Bill 33-38 at this time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the time today.
Thank you very much, Senator. On the bill, gentlelady from Barrigada, you recognize? On the bill? Yes.
Sijus Masi, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of the amended version of Bill number 33-38 COR, and I thank the good author for including me as one of the co-sponsors. This legislation grounded in a singular and urgent purpose. It is to strengthen Guam's protection of minors against sexual abuse by expanding who can be held criminally accountable under our first and second degree criminal sexual conduct laws. This bill is about safeguarding children, age 14 and 15, individuals who are particularly vulnerable, yet often fall into legal gray areas under our current statutes. Today, our laws impose higher penalties on offenders when the perpetrator is a family member, household member, or someone in a clear position of authority. But that is not enough. It leaves out the many real-world scenarios where predators access and abuse children under the guise of trust. Teachers, volunteers, counselors, foster care providers, government employees, and even intimate partners of family members. These are individuals who may not live in the household, but who hold influence, power, or access that enables abuse. Bill number 33-38 corrects the gap. The goal of this bill is to ensure that our laws reflect the reality that exploitation often happens in institutional settings or within blended and non-traditional families. We aim to ensure that offenders who abuse positions of trust face the highest levels of criminal accountability, not a slap on the wrist, but the full force of the law. Yes, the bill was amended, but what remains central and untouched is its intent to create specificity in the relationships between victim and perpetrator. So there are no ambiguities, no loopholes, and no question as to whether justice can be pursued. Whether it's a school teacher grooming a student, a volunteer accessing a child through a service program, or a romantic partner of a parent exploiting trust, this bill ensures they are all held to the same high standard of law. Mr. Speaker, we cannot legislate morality, but we can legislate consequences. And in doing so, we send a clear message. If you prey on our children, regardless of your title or proximity to the family, you will be charged, you will be prosecuted, and you will face the full penalty of Guam law. I ask for my colleagues' full support of this measure, not just as a lawmaker, but as protectors of the most vulnerable members of our island community. Sidu Ismasi, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. On the bill, are there any other members wishing to speak on the bill? Great. Good Senator from Totomaiti, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of Bill number 33-38, which was introduced with the explicit intent to significantly strengthen Guam's criminal sexual conduct laws. The primary focus of this legislation is to expand the elements to encompass perpetrators who victimize children aged 14 and 15. This bill specifically aims to address relationships and positions of authority that are not adequately covered under existing statutes. Unlike most U.S. states, Guam law does not elevate the severity of the crime for 14 and 15-year-olds. When the perpetrator's employment creates opportunities for sexual assault, or if the perpetrator is in a dating relationship with a member of the victim's household. I applaud the author for trying to rectify these holes. So just to paint a picture for the people of Guam at home, imagine a scenario for a 15-year-old girl named Maria. Lives with her older sister, Lena. Lena recently started dating a new man, David, who she met on Tinder. You know, very common thing that could happen here on the island. And then one evening, David commits a sexual offense against Maria. Under the new bill, the severity of the crime would be elevated if David is in a dating relationship with a member of the victim's household, the older sister. So I applaud this novel approach to making sure that victims see justice done when something so horrific happens to them. But it also begs the question, and I asked this of the bill author, let's consider this situation. The 15-year-old lives with the older sister. Sister meets someone on Tinder, and they start dating. If the new partner commits a crime, when do we define, when do they officially start dating, I guess is the question. Will it be clear enough to a jury, or will we see lengthy arguments as to what constitutes whether somebody is in a dating relationship or in a casual relationship? How do we differentiate that? Because while I'm okay to let it go through with that ambiguity in the air and for let the courts to decide, we got to think about how this plays out downstream when this becomes case law. And so I would ask that question to the author. At what point does something go from a dating relationship, from a casual relationship to a dating relationship? How do we clarify that for the judiciary?
Would the author yield to the question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, if you can go ahead and repeat this question again.
So my question is, you know, in the scenario where an older sister who's raising a minor meets somebody online and they have a sexual relationship, at what point does that relationship go from a casual, one-night stand perhaps type of relationship to a full-blown dating relationship as under the statute? Is that something that has to be litigated at courts, or is that something that we can clarify and define now and stop those problems in the future?
Thank you for that question, Senator. During the public hearing, the AG had mentioned that the federal definition is sufficient. and that, case law for federal definition is generally a month or more, but the bill uses the federal definition. So it's already one of those things that is recognized federally in the laws of the federal definition.
Mr. Speaker, would the prime author happen to know the federal definition to share with the viewing audience?
Would you like to yield to that, sir?
Yeah, can let me give if we can get a 1-minute recess.
We'll take a 1-minute recess. What number are you? Probably not. Yeah. It's all there.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker,
Back in session.
thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that 1-minute recess. So the definition that we do have in the bill is from the exact federal definition. As to where we'll be able to get that, I will get that for the senator inquiring. But it is the exact definition from the federal.
That satisfy you, Fredo?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That does satisfy me. And so, yes, thank you to the author for clarifying that. I appreciate that. Again, I commend the bill's author and all the co-sponsors for their unwavering and their bipartisan commitment to serving and protecting Guam's most vulnerable populations, its children. I do have another question, or at least concern, regarding the scope and interpretation of affinity and relationship by blood. Guam has very unique common law situations. Like, for example, let's take a scenario, the Santos family, where a couple, Anna and Ben, have lived together for 15 years and raised 3 children, but they are not legally married. You know, something we see all the time. Ben's brother, Uncle Joe, lives with them as part of the extended household. If Uncle Joe commits a sexual offense against Anna and Ben's 14-year-old child, the new law's definition of affinity is strictly tied to legal marriage. So I would ask this question to the Vice Speaker. We know that many families on Guam live in common law arrangements where relationships are strong and familial, but not legally formalized through marriage. If a child in such a household is harmed by someone who is considered an uncle or aunt, and who is in every practical sense, but not legally related to them by marriage, under our new definitions, could this create a loophole? How do we ensure that our law captures perpetrators who exploit these deeply ingrained yet informal familial ties?
Would the author of the legislation yield to the question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I do. You know, as I did in my opening, I did say that the bill also expands the definition of affinity, and it's only for the criminal sexual conduct. And this includes a person in a dating relationship with one of the victim's parents. So with that being said, obviously the I guess, uncle, if so-called say, would be covered by this expanded definition of the affinity.
Did that answer your question, Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that. I guess really my concern with this, and it's because I support the bill completely and I intend to vote yes on it, but my concern is if we are imprecise in our wording, this leads to problems down the road. So I just want to present these questions to the body for us to think about, but I endorse the core principle of unequivocal support for our children. We must protect them, but we can't just rely on retributive justice alone, or else that will make us forever reactionary. We got to expand our care in more proactive ways as well. We got to look to the core root causes that lead to these crimes in the first place. And we also need to expand our victim services so that the people who do go through this harrowing ordeal have the resources necessary to put their lives back together and put that trauma behind them and become a productive member of society again. So again, I commend the author, but let's, as a body, make sure that we are absolutely clear about our wording to make sure that there are no unintended consequences. We do not want to criminalize relationships wrongly, and we also don't want to create new loopholes either. Both of those are possibilities of unintended consequences. And we also need to address resource deficiencies and holistic support. With these new round of federal budget cuts potentially coming down the pipeline, it's going to be tempting to look to these services as the first places to cut. And I would caution that maybe we pause before we do so. We are really living in some interesting times. Like one of my colleagues said earlier, the big beautiful bill, there's not really much that's beautiful in it for us, potentially. And so we have to brace ourselves and have a collaborative effort from all branches of government, from all members of the community, to make sure that our children are a priority and that they're not preyed upon by the evil that's out there. Because that's what that is. It's an evil. And we got to be vigilant against it constantly. So I look forward to working with my Republican colleagues to getting this legislation in its best possible form. I look forward to further discussion. And I look forward to where this goes in the budget season in terms of how we can support prevention and recovery. So again, I ask all my colleagues to please support this legislation. And if you have any amendments, let's have that discussion. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, are there any other senators wishing to? Gentlelady from Georgia, you're recognized, ma'am.
Jesus Masi, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this bill, and I think it's a good improvement to our laws. Already our laws are very strict, and thankfully they say it is a crime to commit criminal sexual conduct to any person under 14 years of age. And those who are 14 through 16 under any of the following circumstances, whether they are members of the same household, whether they're related by blood or affinity, or whether the actor is in a position of authority over the victim. Those already exist in Guam law with the stiffest penalties. We are adding by this bill additional positions, I would say, of authority, whereas they were formerly described as, in general, as positions of authority over the victim. These are very clear that we're going to include teachers, substitute teachers, administrators, people in the public school system and non-public school system and charter school systems and any school system. We're going to include employees who are regularly employees, contractual employees, or volunteers who are in schools or at school activities. We're going to include them under those people who, if they commit this crime, will be punished severely. We're going to include people who work in child care facilities, operate foster care facilities, as those who we want to face the stiffest penalties because of this position that they hold and because of the youth of the victims. We want to include employees, contractual employees, or volunteers of social services organizations, victims advocacy organizations, youth correctional detention facilities, drug treatment facilities, medical, psychiatric, or psychological treatment facilities. Those people will also be held to the highest penalty because of the relationship that they might have with the victim, these young victims. So we're holding them not to a higher standard, but we're going to punish them to a higher degree because of the youth of these and because of that sacred position which they hold in relation to that youth. This is a power dynamic. Like many criminal sexual conduct cases, it's about power dynamics. And this bill recognizes that, the complexities of power dynamics. It recognizes that we didn't include all of the potential power dynamic systems in our previous law, and we just made a very general provision that says actor in a position of authority over the victim. So these specifics will make it easier for prosecution, make it easier to enforce those stricter penalties, make it easier for the Attorney General to do his job when seeking justice for these victims. It includes, as one of these actors who's going to be held to a higher penalty, those in a dating relationship with a member of the victim's household. We've heard all the stories. So I don't think there will be any debate as that we should not do this. We should do this. I only wanted to pose one question to the author, and that is, he said in his remarks that the bill exempts Romeo and Juliet relationships. And I would ask him if he could just explain that and why we are exempting those relationships.
Did the author of the bill yield to the question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and yes, thank you to the good senator from Zonia on that. You know, this is just this bill was for dating relationships within the family, and for affinity provisions of the bill were worded specifically, like I said, to exclude the Romeo and Juliet relationships. And you know, even with the Attorney General's office, you know, they turn around and they turn around and supported the during the public hearing on the provisions of this bill and how we moved forward with it.
Are you satisfied?
And then, so also in Guam, you know, common law marriages can never be recognized because of the community property laws, and therefore, you know, I guess this was on the dating relationship and not the affinity. But related to the victim not committed by a victim, as in the Romeo and Juliet relationships, both victims, both the victim and both are perpetrators. So, you know, they're one of, you know, they're with each other, right? I mean, and that's why we excluded the Romeo and Juliet in this bill.
Are you satisfied?
This is Masi, and I thank the author for yielding to that question. The reason I ask it is because this bill, we're enforcing very strict penalties for those who commit criminal sexual conduct in the first or second degree against persons under the age of 14, and for that's a blanket, no matter who you are, who the actor is. If the victim's under the age of 14, they will be penalized to the greatest extent of our law. If the victim is between 14 and 16, we're not giving them that same protection. We're giving them almost a lesser protection. Only if you're in one of these special relationships are you going to be punished to the greatest extent of the law. And I just don't know that on Guam, I want to continue to allow that exception for 14 to 16-year-old girls to be abused and not be punished to our fullest extent of the law. So I welcome the changes that we are bringing in, but I just want to make sure when we say we are exempting Romeo, Juliet, that means these people are in relationships and one of those people is below the age of 16. Actually 15 or 16, 15, maybe 14. It just, I just want to put that on the record, Mr. Speaker, that I'm going to support this bill, but I hope that, I know that the Criminal Law Revision Committee that we have funded for the past couple years now is supposed to be hopefully coming to an end with their recommendations for how to revise the criminal code as a whole. But I have no objection to doing this piece today. And I thank the sponsor of the bill, Sidus Masi.
Thank you very much, ma'am. On the bill, are there any other senators wishing to speak on the bill? Gentleman from PT.1, you're recognized.
Sidus Masi, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to rise in support of this bill. Protehi Famagonta, that's what I believe the bill's about. And I want to commend the legislative bodies of not just this 38th Guam Legislature, but just going back to the 36th as well. I know the author had introduced a measure that eliminated the Justice Safety Valve Act. And my colleagues, those of you who were with us in the 37th Guam Legislature, I also want to thank you for unanimously passing a Guam version of Jessica's law. And this law created mandatory minimum sentencing for criminal sexual, first and second degree criminal sexual conduct against victims under 12 years old. And that measure in this hall passed unanimously in the 37th Guam Legislature and was subsequently signed by Governor Leon Guerrero, and is now Public Law 37-98. And so with this current bill, I feel like over the last few years, the people's elected representatives there's so much more work to do, but we remain committed to doing it because Lord knows, sad to say, we have a problem with predators. We have a problem with perverts. We have a problem with pedophiles on this island. And I'm of the opinion that these perpetrators who conduct these sins and these crimes against our children, I don't think there's a cure for it. And I think the remedy, the solution is to keep them locked up for as long as we possibly can. And I commend the author of this bill for really going into detail about the positions of authority that are going to be covered under this statute. And so I do support the bill, but also I want to echo kind of the sentiments of the retiring speaker who brought up the Romeo and Juliet cases that the author says that we're exempting with this bill, and I'm just not so sure I see that exemption in the black and white, and so I'm still supporting the bill and moving forward with it, but I just wanted to also lodge that on the record. I mean, we have seen so many cases of these heinous crimes, and when you talk to the social workers, they always say it's the most trusted people, it's the people in the family, it's the people in the house, it's the mother's boyfriend. And so I'm definitely in support of closing these gaps, and I think that it's a continuation of the work that we as senators have done over the last few legislatures to truly protect. You know, when it's campaign time, we all say, you know, we want to do things for the kids and for the children, but I think that, you know, with this measure and the other ones that I mentioned, the proof is really in the pudding, and I just ask the body that, you know, we continue to look at any gaps, any loopholes, and any increases in sentencing, because I was really shocked when we did pass the Jessica's Law, which I think is very much a part of this current effort. It was shocking to me to find out that 42 or 43 other states already had these types of penalties on the books. And so I'm kind of expressing a little bit of concern, as the retiring speaker was, that we haven't yet kind of delineated and detailed these positions of authority. So I commend the author for the good work that was done there, and I think that this is going to be another measure that, you know, hopefully we pass unanimously, and I'm praying that the governor signs this one into law as well. So Sidus Masi, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to rise in support of this measure. Para ifamagonta. Sidus Masi.
Thank you very much, Senator. On the bill, General Lady from Tumuninga recognized.
Sidus Masi, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand in full support of Bill 33-38. If everyone had the opportunity to read the findings and recommendation, it was extensive. And even in the market meeting, we not only had a market meeting, but then we also had meetings with the Attorney General's office on some concerns she had. During the public hearing, there was a statement that was made by the Assistant Attorney General that it is, and it was quoted that it is not necessary to make the definition of affinity as proposed in the bill applicable to Chapter 25, Title 9, Guam Code Annotate, as family or household members is exhaustive and already included the proposed affinity definition. However, after reviewing additional information that came in through the last minute, it was incorporated into the definition by the Attorney General's office to ensure that this definition would hold, well, basically hold in a court of law, and it's clear and defined. So there was quite a bit of back and forth on this, and I believe the good author will also have a couple amendments. Like I said, it was like right before Committee on Rules that we were trying to get additional information into this. So it was definitely thorough. It was thorough, and I commend the author for moving this legislation forward. You know, stricter penalties for sexual assault against children under 14 are critical to protect vulnerable victims and deter offenders. These crimes cause lifelong trauma to our children. It's not like one time it happens to them. I mean, it's there for the rest of their lives. And that's the importance of making these laws stricter because of the most vulnerable. Every child deserves security and tougher laws to reflect our commitment to shielding them from abuse while demanding swift and severe consequences for violators. So I stand in full support of this legislation and ask that the author allow me to be a co-sponsor of this measure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. On the bill, are there any senators wishing to speak on the bill? Mr. Vice Speaker, you have.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank all my colleagues for their discussion during this on Bill 33-38. And it's important to know that we do try to do what we can to ensure that we continuously update our laws here on Guam to ensure the protection of our youth and those that are most vulnerable. And is any piece of legislation perfect? Absolutely not, but at least we do try as a body to move forward and improve what we do have. Either we repeal legislation, adopt legislation, or bring in new legislation to ensure that the continuity and safety of our people is always there and first and foremost. And with that said, Mr. Speaker, I do have an amendment that was passed out, and this amendment is to add adoption. And adoption is a parental or guardianship relationship between a single or married couple and a child under the age of 18. As you know, adopted children have identical parent-child relationship as children with the parents by blood. And conversely, children of spouses from prior relations of one of the spouses are considered stepchildren of the second spouse. Under Guam law and federal law, stepchildren can qualify as dependents for health insurance, tax filing purposes, but the step-parent does not have full legal parental rights without adopting the stepchild. Therefore, under the current criminal sexual conduct laws, stepchild victims are protected in that first and second degree criminal sexual conduct charge applied to abusers of 14 and 15-year-old stepchild victims, but it does not apply to adopted children, victims that they are neither related by blood or affinity. And this loophole in Guam law does not exist in the model Michigan statute or other states that apply harsher penalties to teenage victims of incest. The statistics show that biological, adopted, and stepchildren are all vulnerable to abuse by relatives of their parents. And by adding this section here, Mr. Speaker, I believe that we'll once again close another loophole that may find its way, and hopefully with this I'll be able to get my colleagues' support on this amendment. And the first one will be on line 2, page 3. And it'll be the actor is related to the victim by blood, adoption, or affinity to the 4th degree of the victim.
A motion is to amend line 2 of page 3 to include
Adoption.
Adoption. The actor is related to the victim by blood, adoption, or affinity to the 4th degree to the victim. So, to add the word adoption. Any objections? Any discussion? No objections? So ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. The next one will be on line 16, page 4. The actor is related to the victim by blood, adoption, or affinity to the 4th degree of the victim. And included in this would be the actor to the victim and adoption, once again.
On page 4, line 16, Vice Speaker, the actor and to the victim is already included in
Yeah,
the...
no, but I was just reading the,
Okay.
I'm sorry, It's adoption, adding the word adoption.
So it's adding the word by, it says by blood, then comma, adoption, okay, or affinity. Any objections? No objections, so ordered.
And the last amendment on this would be line 26, page 8, 15. Adoption refers to the act where the adult formally becomes the guardian of the child and incurs the rights and obligations of a parent.
Again, it's to add the word adoption. So you're going to add now a new line.
Yes, so it'll be 15. Adoption refers to the act where an adult formally becomes the guardian of a child and incurs the rights and obligation of a parent.
Okay, there is existing line 26 or here already. So it's going to be after line 26.
Yes.
So after line 26, okay, a new subsection 15, adoption refers to the act where an adult formally becomes the guardian of a child and incurs the rights and obligations of a parent. Okay. Any objections? No objections? So ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My next amendment will be to add co-sponsors, Senator Gumatata, Senator Chalahi, and Senator Taidagui. I'd like to thank them also for their co-sponsorship of this very important legislation. I'd like to move it down to the third reading.
First off, on the motion to add co-sponsors to the bill? Any objections? No objections, so ordered. On the motion to send the bill down to third reading. Any objections? No objections, so ordered. The next is actually, now we've, based on an earlier motion that was approved, Senator Sabina, on bill number 89-38.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to place Bill 89-38 COR into the third reading file, and I wish to discuss.
On the motion, any objections? No objection? Ma'am, you can proceed.
All right, thank you. Bill 89-38, or the Anafa-Malik Food Donation Act, aims to promote food security by increasing food donations on Guam. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency estimated that in 2019, the food retail, food service, and residential sectors generated about 66 million tons of wasted food in the United States. And in 2022, 12.8% of U.S. households, or 44.2 million people, were food insecure at some time during the year. U.S. EPA considers donating wholesome and edible food as one of the top methods to reduce food waste nationwide. According to a 2020 Jacobs food waste recovery study on Guam, an estimated 20,000 tons of food waste derived from grocery stores, restaurants, and hotels are landfilled in a year. The study noted that if this food were diverted or recovered, the amount could feed around 12% of Guam's population, or 20,000 people. Bill 8938 promotes food donation by formally adopting the federal Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act into Guam law. Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act was passed by the U.S. Congress in 1996 to promote food donations to the needy and to protect food donors from civil and criminal liabilities. Since then, all 50 states have food donation statutes that limit liability to promote the donation of wholesome and edible food from qualified donors to nonprofits or directly to those in need. Bill 8938 specifically proposes to limit liability to those who donate food in good faith, apparently wholesome food, and apparently fit grocery products to the following: persons and gleaners to nonprofit organizations to their clients, and qualified direct donors, which includes agricultural producers, processors or distributors, wholesalers, retail grocers, restaurants, caterers, school food authorities, or institutions of higher education to individuals in need. In this context, apparently wholesome food and apparently fit grocery products refers to items that properly follow federal and local regulations, such as our Guam Food Code, but that may not be readily be marketable due to the appearance, quality, size, surplus, or other conditions, such as produce that is not attractive, but is perfectly healthy to eat. Department of Public Health, which administers the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TFAP, testified in support of the bill, stating that food insecurity is a growing concern given the climate and decrease in some of the social support programs. Individuals struggle to afford nutritious meals, leading to comorbidities and bad health habits and outcomes and social stigmas. Meanwhile, thousands of pounds of edible food are wasted daily, where they could be redirected to community organizations, churches, village mayors, to feed those most in need. Division of Environmental Chief Tom Nadeau also added that the Guam Food Advisory Group, which is looking to update the Guam Food Code using the most recent model food code, includes regulations for food donations. Michelle Crisostomo of Guahan Sustainable Culture testified that since 2020, Guahan Sustainable Culture has helped to redirect over 50,000 pounds of local surplus produce, much of which occurred due to the pandemic, that simultaneously helped to salvage our farming industry on Guam, where they facilitated partnerships between farmers, food businesses, and the Department of Agriculture to connect nutritious food to families who needed it. She also provided practical ideas for implementation. For instance, there are companies which have demonstrated how technology and legal protection can transform food recovery efforts. Gooder is one example which has a food waste management platform to connect businesses with surplus food to nonprofit organizations. They have created an efficient recovery system while providing businesses with the tax benefits and detailed analytics on their contributions to community welfare and environmental sustainability. Guam Solid Waste Authority GM Irvin Slyke testified in support of the bill and provided insight for implementation based on his experience working in waste management in the state of Florida. In the Orlando area, as other places in the US, they had a robust system for transporting food from groceries, restaurants, hotels, to homeless shelters, and suggested mirroring their regulations. General Manager Slyke also shared that corporate policies were prevalent that promoted food donations, which corporations here on island could support as well. West Care Pacific, also who understands firsthand the importance of ensuring consistent access to safe and nutritious food, testified in support of the bill, stating that this legislation encourages businesses to donate surplus food to nonprofit organizations without fear of legal consequences, so long as the food is donated in good faith and is safe to consume. This is a long overdue clarification that will help redirect resources where they are needed most. So Bill 89-38 is a win-win for our community, our local businesses, the environment, because it presents an opportunity for increased donations to our local food pantries and nonprofits, with the hope that they can continue to service our community year-round because they have sufficient amount of food. Businesses can utilize tax deductions when donating to nonprofit organizations, and it reduces the production of methane gas, the second largest greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change, which we as Pacific Islanders are on the front lines of its impacts with sea level rise, increasing intensity of storms, and global warming. I would like to thank my co-sponsors, Vice Speaker V. Anthony Atta, Senators Chris Barnett, Shelley Calvo, Therese Terlahi, and I look forward to the support of my colleagues. Situas Masi.
Situas Masi, ma'am. On the bill, are there any, Mr. Vice Speaker, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague, the author of this piece of legislation, for bringing it forward. It just goes to show the importance of this legislation, where we have all kinds of organizations that go out and feed individuals who are looking for that meal. And I think what we need to do is always ensure that, we don't want to deter them by saying you're going to be held liable for things of what may happen. But when people come out uh, just wanting to do what's right, to do what's good. We have to try and do what we can to protect them as well. I mean, we have individuals that go next door to the park, and they feed individuals there on the weekends when the kitchen is not open on Sundays. And they do it from their heart. You know, they come out, they make their own food, they purchase it, and they cook it right there, and you know, they try to feed as many people as they can. And so we can continue to encourage folks to come out and do what they can to participate and help those who don't have the ability or the means to have a warm meal for that day. Then we should do what we can to encourage that. And this piece of legislation is one step forward again in moving in that direction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker. Now I want to recognize the gentlelady from Pago Bay, ma'am. Ranking member, please.
Situus Masi, Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this bill 89-38 COR is introduced, and I'd like to thank the good sponsor for introducing this matter. When you look, Mr. Speaker, the who, what, why, where, whens on this measure, I'd like to say that what this bill does is it encourages safe food donations in Guam by protecting donors from lawsuits, reducing food waste, supporting food insecure families, and aligning local law with the U.S. Good Samaritan Food Donation Act. And the why for me on this one, Mr. Speaker, is to combat food insecurity, reduce the food waste, and literally protect those who from liability who are acting in good faith on this measure. We know, Mr. Speaker, that we don't have to look far, just within our surrounding areas. It's unfortunate that we do have folks that don't have homes or are homeless. I know that in every issue of homelessness there may be differences of why they're in the streets, but it doesn't stop us and those who want to help support from giving. And in this effort, when we look at encouraging safe food donations and just making sure that there is support for combating food insecurity, I think that this is a good measure, and I thank the good author from, I think, Barragata Heights for introducing this member, and hopefully humbly ask that she put me on as a co-sponsor. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak and rise in support of this measure. Sana Masi.
Thank you, ma'am. On the measure, is there any other senator wishing to provide testimony? Gentlelady from Barragata, ma'am, you're recognized.
Sijus Masi, Speaker. I rise today in strong support of Bill number 89-38 COR, the Inafamaulic Food Donation Act, which seeks to clarify protections from liability for individuals and organizations that donate surplus food in good faith. This measure addresses two of the most pressing challenges in our island: food insecurity and food waste. Each year, an estimated 20,000 tons of edible food is discarded in Guam. Food that could instead nourish our families, our children, and our most vulnerable neighbors. At the same time, over 11,000 households have faced reductions in federal nutritional support, increasing the demand on our food banks and nonprofit providers. What this bill does is simple but powerful. It codifies into Guam law the federal protections granted under the Bill Immersion Good Samaritan Food Donation Act, providing peace of mind to those who wish to donate food safely, but who may hesitate for fear of legal repercussions. It encourages grocery stores, restaurants, farmers, and caterers to give generously without fear, so long as the food is handled properly and the intent is to help. This is more than just a food policy. This is a values policy. It reflects the spirit of Inafamalik, our Chamorro ethic of mutual care, compassion, and community. By adopting this bill, we affirm that no one on our island should go hungry while good food is being thrown away. I commend the bill's author and co-sponsors, and I thank the bill's author for including me to be part of the co-sponsorship for championing this effort, and urge my colleagues to join me in passing this legislation. Together, we can create a stronger, more compassionate, and more sustainable Guam. Sidus Masi, Mr. Speaker.
You're very welcome. Any other senator wishing to? Gentleman from Jigo, yes, sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask a question of the author, and it's just reference to what prevents it from happening today that folks today, and we have to admit it, that among us colleagues here, some of us are part of organizations that we donate food. What prevents us now from the penalty of without this law? The protection of this law, if there's a need.
So the question yield to the author?
Yes.
With the author, yield to the question.
Thank you for that question. And so, as it stands, the Good Samaritan Act does apply to Guam, but because the uncertainty of criminal and civil liabilities, many businesses are afraid to do this, to actually donate, food. And so what this bill, that's the point of this bill, is to make it clear to businesses that they can donate in good faith, wholesome food and fit grocery products without fear of liability. And also there's, since the study, the Jacob study was done, there was a collaboration that was done between Salvation Army and the Hyatt, which still exists today. And so again, nothing's really stopping it. It's just we want to make sure that it expands further to really address food insecurity, which is a grave concern here on this island. And yeah, so thank you for that question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I stand in full support of the bill. I was just curious as what's preventing it today, because I do look forward to the businesses that are going to donate, they can write it off in taxes. But the beauty is that they don't have to worry too much about the liability. And for the organization that many of us are part of, we'll be free from any liability. And we just continue to do what we've been doing for years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm in full support of the bill. And I, as the author, if I could be a co-sponsor, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies first. The gentle lady from Tumuning.
I'll try and be quick, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to allow me to share my support for Bill 89-36. This legislation is not just necessary, it's a moral imperative. Many of us stand behind this initiative, recognizing its power to combat hunger and reduce waste. Former Governor Eddie Baza-Calvo understood this need when he introduced similar legislation in the 29th Guam Legislature, but with time prevented him from its passage. But now we have a second chance, and this bill goes even further, more robust and more refined, more transformative in this legislation. So the legislative intent mentions the importance of the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act created by Congress. It has proven that protecting food donors encourage generosity without fear of liability. Canada and Australia have also enacted similar laws, enforcing the global movement toward food security and sustainability. Guam must follow the suit. Our island must embrace change and rise to meet this challenge. So I stand in full support of this legislation. I think the bill is more than just legislation. It's actually a pathway to nurturing our community, preserving our environment, and most especially, securing the future of our landfill. So I ask, with that being said, Mr. Speaker, I asked also if the author of the legislation can also include me as a co-sponsor as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Gentleman from Ipan.
Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to rise in full support of this measure, which, fortunately I'm a co-sponsor of. I know one of the retiring speakers had asked what's stopping it from happening now, and the answer was the potential liability, which is absolutely correct. One of my parties is a farmer, and how I first kind of got wind of this issue, I didn't even know it was an issue, was he would, one of his friends would come, Uncle Ken would come every day with the pig slop. And if you're anybody raising pigs out there, there's certain places you could get the slop. Some people get it from the GDOE cafeterias. Some people have a connect at, cost you less or any of the distributing companies, and they'll show up and they'll get, cases and cases of just different types of foods. And that was the first time I tried, Edzi, the cotton candy grapes. It was because one of the distributors, the stock had expired. It was, they couldn't sell it anymore, but they also didn't want to give it away because of the potential liability. So guess who got to eat it? The pig, and we tried some too. But this was the case with the cherry tomatoes, the kiwis, broccoli, spinach, a lot of this stuff, once it goes past like the must sell by date, these stores, these distributors are giving it to the farmers mostly. I mean, some of them, actually if you go into some of the stores, and people of Guam, if you feel me on this, please touch your screen. Some of these stores are still trying to sell us moldy fruits and vegetables. And sometimes I go to stores, very prominent stores, and you get home and you have to pick out, fruit that's got mold in it. So hopefully this bill will encourage, better housekeeping at a lot of our establishments that sell groceries. Maybe they're just trying to make that bottom line, but if there's an avenue where they could donate this food, Masaya, pick out the moldy ones, then I'm in full support of it because, I had no idea. The colleague from Barragata had said there was some like 20 tons of food that just gets thrown away here on Guam, and I think my kids are contributing part of that with their leftovers. But no, again, it's a great measure, and I think it's just another one of these examples. As this legislation was passed in the States, I think the author said in 1996 finance. So yeah, it's way past overdue, and I commend the author, and I think this is a great way to get some much needed commodities, foods, and a lot of times Senator San Augustine's right. Some of us are with organizations that give out foods, but a lot of it is just the canned stuff. So hopefully this will enable us to avail of, some of the healthier stuff that's not yet all the way gone bad. So I support the measure. Very proud to be a co-sponsor, and I commend the author. She's very consistent in her legislation of this type to really modernize a lot of our statutes where they need it. So Sidus Masi, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. On the bill, are there any other senators wishing? Gentleman from Momoto Tumaiti, sir, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of Bill 89-38. I think that this is a worthwhile time to re-explore our laws, make them less stringent, to make sure that we have not used the law as a thing that guides us, but as a straitjacket that prevents us from even doing something as basic as giving away food before it goes bad. I know in my own family tree that goes back to the American mainland that they lived through the Depression era. And in our family lore, there's stories about how they made it through because they lived in tight-knit communities. And then before food went bad at their local grocery stores, they were given away to people in the community, and everyone made do. Nothing was wasted. And as we go into these increasingly interesting times, I think it's prudent on us to look at legislation like this so that we could do something as basic as give away food before it goes bad. That being said, I do have some questions regarding some of the provisions of it, so I hope perhaps the author might be able to answer some of those questions for me. One of them is, the bill grants liability protections for donations made in good faith of apparently wholesome food or apparently fit grocery products. Given that the bill does not explicitly define good faith and apparently wholesome food, but still requires adherence to the Guam Food Code, what specific actionable criteria or guidelines will Department of Public Health and Social Services develop to ensure a consistent and verifiable standard for perishable items or those nearing expiration to prevent subjective interpretation that could compromise public health?
Would the author of the legislation yield to the question?
Okay, so I do. There is a definition for apparently wholesome food. Was that the question? Yeah.
Yes, and good faith.
Okay, so apparently wholesome food means food, so it states it in the bill itself. It's on page, according to my computer, it's on page 4. B, apparently wholesome food means food that meets all quality and labeling standards imposed by federal, state, and local laws and regulations. So in Guam, we call it the Guam Food Code, even though the food may not be readily marketable due to appearance, age, freshness, grade, size, surplus, or other conditions. So in regards to in good faith, I think, yeah, we were thinking of putting that definition in there, but being that there is a, let me just get that answer to you. So there is a definition for good faith in the GCA that currently exists. And if I can pull that up, give me 1 second to pull that up. But there is a definition of good faith.
Sure, no problem. I'm willing to wait, ma'am.
You want to take a recess for that? Or?
Yeah, let's take a recess for that.
Let's do that. Let's take a 1-minute recess. back from session, recess. Senator Perez, do you have the answer for?
Yes, I
the
do.
Senate?
Thank you for that recess. And so, actually, there's quite a few areas in the GCA that have good faith in it. And so there's one in the Guam Landlord and Tenant Rental Act of 2018. It defines good faith as means a transaction done honestly and objectively with no deliberate intent to defraud the other party.
I'm satisfied with that. Are you satisfied with that, Senator?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I am satisfied with that. The other question I had was a contradiction that I noticed in the a contradiction I noticed between the mandate that DPHS currently has and their current regulatory limitations. So my question is, Chief Nadao stated unequivocally that DPHS do not get involved and have no authority to regulate food donations where no commerce is involved. Yet the bill mandates that apparently wholesome food must meet Guam Food Code standards, and Section 3 requires DPHSS to promulgate rules and regulations. How does the department reconcile this stated lack of regulatory authority over non-commercial donations with its statutory duty to ensure food safety under the Guam Food Code and its new mandate to promulgate rules for this act? What new legal framework or interagency agreements are envisioned to bridge this gap in oversight for the entire food chain of food donations, from donor to ultimate recipient?
The author yield to the question.
I do. Actually, there's no regulatory authority needed. It's basically the authority that's given to them is to create regulations for how food is handled, right? Whether it's a commercial activity or not. And so so that is their purview, is to ensure the safety of the public when it comes to food. And just to support that, there is the most recent Model Food Code Act, which includes donations of food. And so, you know, perhaps it's really in the updating of the regulations that would close that gap. I hope that answers the question.
Before you do that, let's take a 1-minute recess. Back in session. So, I think that he was awaiting your response from.
Yes, so I guess I stated earlier that the model food, so the food code is the regulations that accompany the laws. And so what Chief Nadeau was saying is that that they are going to update it and to base it off the latest model food code, which includes food donations. And so this bill also gives them, I guess, yeah, so this bill would also provide them the requirement to make those regulations in Section 3, but I will have an amendment to codify that so that it is more clear as far as their authorities are concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're welcome.
And then other areas of concern I was curious about was the importance of time and temperature controls for perishable foods was highlighted by Mr. Sleeke, referencing Florida's robust system and detailed in FDA guidelines that while the bill refers to the Guam Food Code, it does not explicitly outline specific requirements for handling, storage, or transportation of time temperature control for safety after they are donated by the commercial entity to a nonprofit or direct recipient. What specific protocols will be mandated in the forthcoming rules and regulations to ensure the safe handling, storage, and transport of the highly perishable donated foods by nonprofits? Is that something that we have to clarify here, or is this just something that happens during the rules and regs process organically?
Are you willing to yield to the question?
Yes, I yield to the question, and thank you for those questions. I think it's really critical that we ensure the safety of the public. And so this is something that's already done currently, and it's done successfully with the Salvation Army. And so they ensure that temperatures are proper, storage is proper, and the time that it's out is also meets standards, regular food handling standards. And so although it's not in regulations yet, this is something that the chief of Division of Environmental Health has put together a Guam Food Advisory Group, and they were instrumental in updating the food code, the Guam Food Code for Guam, the Guam Food Code, which took about a long time, but now they said that because they're primed to update the code, they feel that it's going to take not as long, and I believe he said they hope to get it done within, I think it was 9 months time, but yeah, I guess not to quote him because yeah, the meetings and the discussions have to take place. But yes, ultimately they would like to ensure the safety of the public. And being that it's done successfully, I have confidence in their ability to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I guess, you know, and I really appreciate the author for answering these questions. I've always been a big believer that ideas that are tested grow stronger, and I just want to make sure this bill is as strong as we can possibly make it. And so I guess my last question, to play devil's advocate, is really to examine the question of liability, because the bill's liability exception hinges on gross negligence or intentional misconduct, which are defined as knowing the conduct was likely to be harmful or is harmful. This sets a very high bar for proving liability, as noted in analysis of similar law. How will Department of Health and Social Services or the legal system practically differentiate between good faith errors and negligence, which is not excluded? and the even higher bar of gross negligence or intentional misconduct in real-world scenarios involving donated food. What evidentiary standards or investigative protocols will be established to ensure that genuine instances of harmful conduct are not shielded by high bar for liability? I know the question here is, we want to reduce liability, that's the whole point, so people will be willing to donate. But I also want to just ask the question from the other end, where's the line where we go too far? Because I also want to make sure that this doesn't act as a shield for bad actors.
I appreciate the question, and it sounds like there's 3 different questions within that breath. So I'm going to ask the author if she's willing to yield to this, recognizing that there are 3 different answers that is actually being sought at here. Would you yield to the questions, ma'am? Okay, you want to get in? Would you like to, why don't we do this? Let's take a 1-minute recess to you talk so that you can make sure that she gives you the right answer.
Sure.
Want to do that, please? 1-minute recess. Okay, we're good? Mic was hot. Okay, bring us back in. Back in session. Ma'am, based on, are you willing to yield to the question?
Yes, I do. I yield to the question. And so, I think what really matters is that we look to those jurisdictions that have successfully accomplished this goal of food donations. And so, like Irvin Slike said, don't reinvent the wheel. Take a look and see what happens in Orlando area. He even said to the dismay of some of the guests at these food establishments, the food is taken away because there's a time limit in which food can be left out, right? So it's really about complying with those regulations that make it safe for people to eat, for people to eat donated food that is made in good faith. And so I think those regulations, like I said, is what's really going to help us to protect the community.
Thank you. Sir, does that satisfy you?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to again thank the author for answering such probing and comprehensive questions during this debate. It's through rigorous examination that we could really provide the best type of legislation to the people of Guam. And I thank you for your dialogue in this instance. The scrutiny is necessary and invaluable to identifying the potential challenges in any legislation. And I welcome all my colleagues to ask questions and, poke and prod and see how these bills hold up. I do have an unwavering commitment to this community to make sure that we get food in people's bellies. Through the wonders and magic of modern technology, we're able to create enough food for the entire world. The challenge becomes in getting that food to people. And this is one way we can, on the local level, get food to people immediately that otherwise would have gone to waste. Ultimately, the core values of this bill is aimed at addressing food insecurity. The stark reality is there's so many households currently on SNAP benefits. And in the next few months, we may see massive cuts to a lot of the social safety nets that help underpin our society in many ways. This bill also helps reduce food waste. This bill also supports local businesses. And it does it by fostering the naphthalic spirit of the island. So I ask my colleagues to please rise in support of this bill. If we need to add any extra language, I suggest we do so, because ultimately, in all of our legislations, when our heart is in the right place, the biggest thing we got to watch out for is unintended consequences. And so, you know, I thank again the author for going through my inquiry about the various pressure points on this bill, and I rise in full support of this bill and ask my colleagues to do so as well. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. On the bill, any other senators wishing to speak on the bill? Gentlelady from Georgia, you're recognized.
Situs Masi, I'd just like to commend the author on the bill. I think it's great that we can implement this on Guam, and we've got the support of public health going forward in developing any necessary rules. I want to ask if in other jurisdictions, have they ever gone any further in allowing, right now the law will, or the bill says that we are going to allow, when the food meets quality and labeling standards of the federal and local laws, then they are allowed to donate it. And I guess it says something like less than marketable, or reduced marketability, but that it's meeting all the standards. So I just wanted to ask the author if she knows, if she would yield, whether other states allow donation of food that does not meet the quality and labeling standards of federal and local law, if, for example, those who are receiving it waive liability, or those who are receiving it are informed of the substandardness of the product.
Would the author yield to the question?
So in the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act, it does allow for a partial compliance. And so in this bill, it does include that, but we didn't include everything in the Bill Emerson Act. One part that we didn't include was the reconditioning of food, and we thought that was not, that was questionable. And so the one part that we left in was that as long as the donation is made with that expressed knowledge that of the defective or distressed condition. So that is the partial non-compliance, and that could mean past the due date. So again, this would depend upon how the regulations are created. And as far as other jurisdictions, I would have to do more research on that one and how they handle that. But overall, this act covers all the 50 states and all the US too as well.
Ma'am, did that answer your question?
Yes, I thank the author, and I stand in full support of the bill. Situs Masi, Mr. Speaker.
You're very much welcome. On the bill, are there any other senators willing to speak on the bill? No other senators? Senator Perez, you're...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do have a couple amendments, 3 amendments in fact, and one involves the definition for good faith, which is being emailed to the clerks, I believe, at this time or sessions. And I'll just go ahead and read it. I read it earlier. So in the definition section of the bill, I'd like to proffer the amendment to add good faith means a transaction done honestly and objectively with no deliberate intent to defraud the other party, and to allow legal to make technical corrections.
Have you uploaded the amendment? Yeah, let me see it. Take a 1 minute recess. Back in session?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the clerks for their speedy work. So this amendment is written, and I would like to proffer this amendment to add a definition for good faith, which means a transaction done honestly and objectively with no deliberate intent to defraud the other party, and to allow legal and clerks to make technical corrections. And this is in response to a question by my colleague about the definition of good faith. And this just makes it really clear because it is mentioned in the bill. And I ask for my colleague's support. Thank you.
On the amendment, any discussion? No discussion? Any objections? No objections, so ordered. Senator Parrish, you still have the floor.
So thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do have two amendments. I'll start with the co-sponsorship because the other one, while it's printing up. So I would like to add co-sponsors to the bill. I would like to add, so Senator Teletatigui asked me last night, so I'd like to add her as a co-sponsor. Senator Tina Rose Munia Barnes, I'd like to add as a co-sponsor. Senator Sabrina Salas Matanani, thank you for the hard work that she's done to put out the committee report and to support the bill. Also, I'd like to add Senator Joe Sinagostine for his support. And if there are other colleagues, oh, excuse me. my Speaker Frank Boss Jr. As a co-sponsor. Senator Will Parkinson. And if there's anyone else, Senator Jesse Lujan as a co-sponsor. Thank you, Senator.
Okay, there's a motion for a co-sponsor, Senator Teletatigui, Senator Tina Rose Mooney Barnes, Senator Sabrina Salas Matanani, Senator Joe Sinagostine, myself, Senator Will Parkinson, and Senator Jess Lujan. Okay, any objections? No objections, so ordered. And your third one?
Yes, the third one, if you can take a look at the bill, we're basically codifying Section 3 of the bill. So if you look at Section 3 of the bill, it says rules and regulations. The Director of the Department of Public Health and Social Services shall promulgate the rules and regulations to implement. It says this section pursuant to the Administrative Act, but I would probably say the rules and regulations to implement this chapter instead of section. So I guess we'll wait the amendment. Okay.
Okay, let's take a minute recess to be able to do that. Back in session, Senator Perez, you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I believe everyone has the amendment now, and it's to add a new section 40A107 to the bill to read, for Section 40A107, Rules and Regulations. The Director of Department of Public Health and Social Services shall promulgate rules and regulations to implement this chapter pursuant to the Administrative Adjudication Act. And so this codifies what was not originally codified in the bill itself. And I ask for my colleagues' support on this. Thank you.
On the amendment, good Senator from Tumoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I'm looking at the legislation on page 7, Section 3, Rules and Regulations. The Director of Department of Public Health and Social shall promulgate rules and regulations implemented in section pursuant to the Administrative Adjudication Act. This is already in here. So I'm not quite sure, and I'd like to get legal's opinion, because if this is the case, then you're numbering this 40A107, and then still you're repeating it in section 3. If we're going to do that, then shouldn't we be striking out section 3 and then just incorporate 40A107? You know what I mean? So you're duplicating. So maybe if I can make an amendment to the amendment, would that be okay? Okay. So notwithstanding, Mr. Chair, you know, we don't save a tree here. All we're going to do is just continue on and just strike out section 3. So that's on line 13, ending the strikeout on line 15 where it says act, and this is on page 7. And then we incorporate this section.
On the amendment to the amendment.
I rise in full support of this amendment to the amendment. Thank you, Senator, for catching that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any discussion on the amendment to the amendment? No discussion? Ma'am, you want to close it?
Oh, and there's no, has there been a ruling or?
No, that's.
We're all good? Okay.
We're all good.
Okay,
know,
thank
we-
you. So I
we
just
all know
make
what
that
you mean.
motion, so
Yes.
there's no objection? Okay, thank you, Mr.
No objections, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Perez?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to discuss Bill 89-38. And I want to thanks to my colleagues for the spirited discussion and support. Bill 89-38, or the Anafa Malik Food Donation Act, aims to promote food security by increasing food donations on Guam. Locally, an estimated 20,000 tons of food are thrown away, which, if diverted, could feed about 12% of Guam's population, or about 20,000 people. And Bill 89-38 aims to adopt the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act, which has helped address food insecurity across the U.S. for decades by limiting liability for food donations made in good faith. With Bill 89-38, or the Anafa Malik Food Donation Act, we can accomplish various goals, providing food security for our people, assisting nonprofits, supporting businesses, curbing methane emissions, and fostering an even greater culture of generosity that has the power to uplift our community and island. And I thank my colleagues for their support. Masi.
Thank you, Senator Perez. For housekeeping measures, we're going to go and clean this up first. First, we're going to rule, on the amendment as amended. Okay, first, we'll dispense of that first. Okay? So on the amendment as amended, by striking out first section 3 and then replacing it with your language, are there any objections? No objections, so ordered. On the motion to move the bill 89-38 COR to the third reading file, are there any objections? No objections, so ordered. Next is bill number 13-38 COR. The gentle lady from Zonia, you are recognized, ma'am.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to move Bill number 13-38 COR as amended by the Committee on Health and Veterans Affairs to the third reading. It is introduced by myself, Therese M. Terlahi. It is an act to add a new Chapter 98 to Division 4, Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, relative to establishing a public-private partnership for Guam's public hospital. And I'd like to speak on that motion.
You can proceed, ma'am. Thank you.
Masi. I rise today, colleagues, to ask your support for Bill 13. It seeks to authorize a public-private partnership, or a PPP, for the management of Guam Memorial Hospital. And in simple terms, it directs GMH to partner or contract with a qualified private entity to help run and improve our island's only public hospital. The bill establishes a P3 committee who shall develop an RFP, or request for proposals, that defines the scope of the contract and the payment terms and solicits prospective contract partners. The P3 committee created by this bill shall estimate the contract costs and suggest financing or seek legislative funding for implementation of the prospective contract. And then the committee will publish the RFP and assist GMH in negotiating a contract. The P3 committee shall be assisted by the AG and GSA throughout the process. The RFP shall include, according to the bill, at a minimum, enhanced billing and collections to maximize revenues, updates to TEFRA or Medicare rebasing, efficiency and cost reduction in operations, maintenance and potential upgrades to the facility to meet immediate healthcare needs, upgrades to information technology to support patient care and administrative functions, and any other service identified by the committee to ensure operational efficiency and improved patient care. The prospective contract shall be funded by subsequent legislative appropriation after the RFP is concluded and we can get a better idea of how much that will cost, may be for 3 to 5 years, and may extend to the new hospital. I introduced this bill because despite our collective efforts and repeated funding support over the years, GMH continues to face dire operational problems that funding alone will not resolve. These problems are not new. They stem from a combination of decades-long systemic issues, some management mistakes, some unexpected and unpredictable setbacks. These are across multiple governors and hospital management teams, and despite the hardworking staff and managers at GMH. This bill, however, confronts an uncomfortable truth. Our hospital has been in perpetual crisis, and doing more of the same is simply not an option. Neither is shutting it down, as they have threatened, and neither can we allow GMH to incur a larger debt burden, as they propose, for future generations of taxpayers without any assurance of improvement. The idea of a public-private partnership was recommended by various parties, particularly back in 2016, a GMH task force consisting of stakeholders and industry experts studied the hospital's problems and concluded that pursuing the PPP, the partnership, was the best path to, quote, ensure a sustainable, quality facility for the people of Guam, unquote. That same year, the legislature passed Public Law 33-143, which directed GITA to explore interest from potential private partners, and then GITA put out an RFI, request for information. And 3 entities responded with interest, showing that despite the complex issues at GMH, mutual public and private benefit is feasible. The recommendation from GITA at that time was to issue an RFP, but none was issued. In 2020, a bill was introduced to authorize GMH Board of Trustees to issue an RFP to seek that public-private partnership. That bill didn't pass, mainly due to GMH's objections and concerns raised about procurement rules and the board's ability by itself to produce an RFP of this nature. And those were valid concerns, and I drafted this bill considering those prior concerns. Even the governor herself has advocated for a PPP for GMH
as a member of the then 2016 task force, and again in her 2024 State of the Island address, and when she visited USC's Keck Medical Center and was quoted saying that she sees them, quote, taking a major role in running the new hospital, unquote. The Lieutenant Governor also said, quote, if it's going to be on good footing and be able to provide services, it's quite clear that we need to get some private sector help, experienced companies in management, but also part of networks so that we can bring in personnel and be able to be part of a network of hospitals that can help focus on the patient care, unquote. Mr. David John, local businessman, testified in favor of this bill, stating a PPP can enhance quality of care, improve operational efficiency, and expand services for Guam. Benefits include access to a broader network of healthcare professionals, advanced training and new technologies, implementation of best practices from other jurisdictions. Gita is currently in a contract with a hospital consultant whose report should better inform the work of this P3 committee, the work in making the RFP. GMH's financial and operational struggles are severe and well documented. And year after year, we have infused GMH with emergency funds and additional budgetary support, yet the hospital remains on life support. To illustrate this point, consider a few recent examples of the challenges that GMH continues to face. At the start of FY24, GMH had roughly $80 million in funding, including $30 million in a budget appropriation in September, exceeding the governor's request of about $23 million. The legislature's additional appropriation a month later of $30 million in Public Law 3743, and $20 million pledged by the governor from federal ARP to fund critical CIP projects. Together with the governor's executive order at that time for her fiscal team to conduct review and recommendations on GMH's finances. Despite this substantial support, GMH is again running out of money. We were told in January, 10 million of the ARP funds were diverted from CIP projects to unpaid vendors, and 10 million was lost to GMH altogether. Just this month, GMH officials said they could not meet payroll for GMH employees. They revealed that the hospital is in debt roughly 20 million to cover expenses like power bills, medical supplies, and other vendor payments. And we've been repeating a troubling cycle, providing funds, making promises, and yet, again, the hospital is unable to pay its bills. For the past 6 years, legislative appropriations in the budget for GMH have been more than the governor's request for GMH. Once, they were the same. In the 35th Guam Legislature not too long ago, we authorized tax credits for medical equipment for the Guam Memorial Hospital, which they did not avail of. We authorized, in that same term, $10 million from the Hospital Capital Improvement Fund to GMH for CIPs, which the hospital did not even request in its budget. Capital improvement projects that they admitted were dire, necessary, but refused to request. In the 33rd Guam Legislature, they financed $9.2 million for a labor and delivery ward. That, as we have heard in recent hearings, is still pending, not begun. They authorized at that time, that year in the 33rd Guam Legislature, tax-exempt bonds to pay $30 million to GMH payables, $15 million for GMH FY 2017 accounts payables. I do not want to go down that road again, where we have to borrow money to pay our bills at GMH. So clearly, not all of GMH's problems can be blamed on insufficient funding. Many stem from internal decisions and mismanagement over the years. One example is the electronic health record system that GMH invested in. Hospital management selected an EHR platform that GMH later admitted was not appropriate for an acute care hospital after spending $5 million of taxpayer money on it. This set back the hospital's modernization, and currently GMH is still without an appropriate EHR system. The $20 million in capital funds were forfeited because they were not obligated on time, according to DOA. GMH did not rebase TEFRA or Medicare in the last 6 years, has not met revenue and collection projections despite expenditures on an EHR upgrade and on a collections consultant contract that was criticized by the OPA and was cited as well by the OPA and public auditor for physicians getting paid for multiple jobs at once. CIP projects did not proceed as planned, including the labor and delivery renovation, which was funded since 2016. I introduced this bill to pursue a new solution that addresses the root causes of GMH's struggle.
Thank you, Senator. Your time is up. Any other senator who would like to speak on the main motion? On the bill. No, I'm sorry, the bill.
Okay. Well, no.
Senator from MTM.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker. I have some questions for the bill author. The committee report noted that the bill lacks clarity on the PPP scope and provides no dedicated funding for initiating a request for proposals. How exactly is this public-private partnership envisioned to work? Is it a management contract, a lease of GMH to a private operator, or a construction of a new facility? And without any funding allocated for the RFP and expert consultants, how will you properly plan, issue, and evaluate proposals to ensure we get the right partner?
Is that a question for the author of the bill?
Yes, sir.
Would you yield to the question?
Yes, I think there were several questions there. I can't remember all of them, but one of them is about the funding. Yes, correct. The committee report states that this bill does not have funding. That's correct. By design, this bill does not have funding. This bill is directing a committee of stakeholders on Guam, finance experts, hospital experts, and those stakeholders of the hospital to create an RFP, a request for proposals, to determine which parts of the hospital will be privately managed, all or just part, and which parts. And that will be decided by this committee, and when they decide that, and they create their RFP, that's, according to the bill, will come to the legislature, so that then we must decide whether we can afford that proposal and come up with money. We have no idea right now how much that will cost, because the parameters can go from all or just portions. So based on their recommendations, the bill says the legislature, particularly the health committee chair, will be able to have public hearings, get additional input in case that committee perhaps did not get enough input. We have a safety net that the legislature can get additional input from stakeholders and make sure that, and then of course it's up to us to find a funding mechanism to pay for that contractor when that RFP is issued. After the legislature does that, they issue the RFP and they negotiate that contract with the funding source secured.
Thank you, Senator. Does that answer your question or several of your questions there, Senator?
Yes, thank you very much. I guess I do have another follow-up question for the author. GMH has been chronically underfunded, running multi-million-dollar deficits year after year. In fact, hospital officials warned last year that without an extra $20 million infusion, GMH would have to shut down critical units. What about this PPP model will fundamentally change that trajectory?
Would you yield to the question, ma'am?
Yes, I will. And it's a good question. Of course, what about this is going to change this trajectory we are on? The biggest part of it is because this is going to mandate that we bring in best practices across the nation, best practices in hospital management. We are going to bring in experts. We're not going to flounder anymore by guessing what we should do and then coming back years later and say, well, that was the wrong system. We should have done another system. This is a field, hospital management, that is unique, and it's growing, and it has changed over the years, just even in recent times, because of the challenges that communities face in funding hospitals, because of the changing in medical technologies and practices. So this is going to change that fundamental thing that we have a politically appointed board. They make decisions based on what they know, and instead put in critical areas recommended by this P3 committee, a professional hospital management team, such as the governor proposes from USC, famous international hospital management team. I'm all for that. But we need to lay out the parameters, and if we are going to put this cost on taxpayers, then it's up to us as a legislature to lay out these parameters and make sure that stakeholders are going to also be involved.
Can I answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The other thing I think about when we talk about this PPP model is that oftentimes, how can we ensure that this deal won't end up costing the government and the taxpayers more in the long run? In hospital PPPs, which are largely untested, there are concerns about high financing costs and potential prioritizations of profit over patient care. What safeguards will be in place so that patient care is never compromised for profitability is a question I'd like to ask the author.
Would the author yield to the question?
I would absolutely yield to that question. There have been studies done on PPPs that show that private partners can help reduce losses by introducing revenue cycle systems that improve collections, tapping into bulk purchasing power, providing expertise to capture more insurance and federal reimbursements or grants, modernizing information technology and EHR systems, enforcing performance-based, meaning we are contracting them to meet a certain performance standards, or they don't get paid. Performance-based staffing and inventory controls, bringing outside clinical and facilities expertise that shortens wait times. And these are the proven in studies from PPPs, the proven benefits. Keep critical equipment running, ensure medicines and linens are always on hand. So it will cost taxpayers just like our current hospital is costing taxpayers. But hopefully, we are going to be able to predict what we are going to cost our taxpayers. We are going to be able to control what we are going to put on our taxpayers, and we are going to be able to have standards of performance, finally, that they deserve, that our taxpayers who are funding the bills deserve, because that has to be written in the contract. That's why this P3 committee and writing this RFP, this is a very important job for Guam. That's why the bill mandates the AG, GSA's assistance. We need no excuses here. It's all hands on deck to make the best RFP that we can come up with and to make a good deal for Guam. Of course, we need a good negotiating committee. We don't control that, but I'm hoping with this P3 committee watching over, we've got a mix of interests. We've got, physicians, we've got the Nurse Association, we've got Of course, the experts in financing. We've got those who have experience in running our own GMH and are familiar with the GMH's particular problems. All of those people together, GIDA, our financing experts, all of them together to make sure that we do not cost taxpayers more than we are predicting in the RFP or that we are willing to fund. And we are funding it, so we are going to set a finite amount of funding for this. That's what I think that the original 2016 task force envisioned, that we are going to control the costs by managing and laying out standards of performance that you get paid because you perform to these standards at a certain amount.
Thank you. Does that satisfy your question, sir?
Thank you. It does, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to acknowledge the reality that we have a decades-long crisis at GMH, and I commend the author for this legislation to try and break up the status quo. Year after year, we've seen the same problems, the same headlines: financial shortfalls, failing infrastructure, staffing woes, and constant Band-Aid fixes. It's time to try something fundamentally different to try and save our hospital. I recognize some of my colleagues' concerns that this is not a perfect bill, and that's why we ask these questions. Like, one of the questions I still have is the implementation timeline. If this bill becomes law, what is the realistic timeline to get a private partner on board and operational? So I'd like to ask the author if she could kind of give us an outline or a ballpark on what kind of timeline we're looking at for when we can actually get a working 3P organization plugged in and operational, and if, also I guess a follow-up question, what happens if we can't find any qualified private firms to respond or the negotiations fail? Is there a contingency plan to address if the PPP doesn't materialize?
Would the author of the bill yield to the question?
Senator Masi, yes. The backup plan is status quo. The backup plan is we as a legislature with our oversight and our financing are going to continue to give GMH whatever we can give them, however we can help them. We are going to rely on the governor's fiscal team to continue to make recommendations, although I'll note that they made none to GMH according to GMH's testimony since the emergency 30 million for unpaid vendors. And we will kind of continue to use, hopefully, Organic Act powers of the governor to take care of the hospital. That's all I can tell you, because that's if the P3 doesn't work, then we need to find out why not and fix it. So there may be a hole that they want it to be limited to certain things. We won't know that until we try it. But the RFI went out. There were at least three interested vendors. They are interested. So when GIDA went out for a hospital consultant contract, they got interest, they awarded. They are in the middle of fine-tuning a report from this vendor or contractor that assesses GMH's needs. And it's perfect timing because that report is going to inform this P3 committee. It pretty much has done the research, and it's going to inform the P3 committee, and the P3 committee can take that research and write an RFP with the help of the AG and the other parties. So I know it was the backup plan, and then what was the first question, Senator?
What happens if, what is the timeline for one of these to get operational?
All right, so the draft report from GIDA was due in April, and when I followed up, it had not been done. They said now they have a draft today that they are reviewing it, Gita's team, and a final report will come out shortly. But so it's really just a matter of how hard they work. And if you look at the people who are on the Pre-3 committee, according to this bill, they are motivated people. We've got Gita, who already should be close to expert at this after this consultant of theirs, after consulting with Matrix as well, and all the previous consultants that Gita may have had, and their financing expertise already. And then there's agencies, of course, BBMR, DOA, the chairperson on health, from the legislature, GMH's trustees, the Guam Medical Association, Guam Medical Society, Guam Nurse Association, public health. And so I'm hoping that they can get this done. The bill does not mandate a timeline because I just think these people know we're going for, this is a life or death situation already at GMH, I believe. And I don't think it's in anybody's interest, especially if we are planning to spend $1 trillion or $1 billion on a new medical facility, that we do not get this done immediately. And our current facility cannot afford to continue to just say we're going to look for more money. We are tapping into crucial money that's going to sustain the people of Guam through terrible tax cuts, Senator, as you described earlier. So I hope that they will act in all earnest.
Does that answer your question, John?
Yeah, yes, it does, sir. Thank you very much. This is a life and death situation because the retiring speaker is right. This is our only public hospital, and I don't know what to think about the day when someday a typhoon rolls through our island and that hospital doesn't survive. I've spoken to people who work at GMH, and their message is generally consistent. They are desperate for change. I remember at a recent oversight hearing, I said the words, all I can say is that I've lost faith in the management of this hospital. And that was in reference to them losing tens of millions of dollars because they didn't get it spent in time. And so while I welcome this 3P as a mechanism to get greater accountability in the hospital, my question to the author is what kind of accountability mechanisms do we have to ensure that we're not trading one ineffective management team for another? You know, this is a question I've asked before in other scenarios. Who watches the watchers? Who watches the PPP in this instance?
The author yields to the question.
Yes, and in all humbleness, that is a great question because it's one of the things I'm always suspicious of. Like, just allowing contracts in general does not solve our problem unless we are willing to negotiate those contracts very well. We are willing as a legislature to oversee those, what they are actually going to do in those contracts before we fund them. That's our time to do that. That's when we will be able to answer all the questions and be able to find how we hold them accountable. And that's actually why I have been convinced to convert, because we have not been able to hold current management accountable. And we will be able to hold a private contractor accountable by a contract, by contract terms that are enforceable if we do our negotiations and contracting correctly. And so that's why I have faith in that process. And I do not want to waste taxpayers' money, so I appreciate that question.
Yeah. And I guess my other, and this is not really for the author, just kind of a rhetorical question in general. If we are going to have a whole new executive staff basically running the show over there, what's the point of the current executive staff that we have? What are they going to actually be doing if somebody else is actually going to be running the hospital? I actually don't know the answers to that question, but I think it's one that we should ask ourselves, because we seem to have this problem of chronic understaffing and retention. And you know what? Having to spring for a whole new executive management team is not the sort of thing that is going to make our pay and retention problems easier to solve. I worry about the funding dilemmas because we really do need stable funding at GMH. Again, I want to remind my colleagues that they are constantly in a perennial budget crisis. For FY25, GMH asked for $74 million, but barely got half of that. And by last fall, they were warning of unit closures of an extra $20 million didn't materialize. Think about that. Guam's only hospital has had to beg for supplemental appropriations just to keep the lights on. This is unstable hand-to-mouth funding, and it is no way to run a critical healthcare institution. A public-private partnership could bring infusions of capital and more efficient financial management. And I too have to echo questions of my colleagues earlier, because I remember before we had conversations about public-private partnership, billing and other areas where we looked to it, and we had all these assurances from the hospital that they could do the job, and I was skeptical at the time. And here we are going back to that original idea come full circle. So I commend the author for giving this issue a second look, because I too share skepticism of public-private partnerships. However, what we are doing now is clearly not working, and we have to do something. And so for that, I rise in support of this legislation. I ask my colleagues to support this legislation, and I would like to ask Senator Terlahi if I could be a co-sponsor on this legislation. Our hospital is in dire straits, and it's only going to get worse as this big, beautiful Republican bill comes down from Congress and blows massive holes in our budget. And so we need to be prepared for that. We need to be prepared for a lot of pain this budget season. Government cuts we may need to do. The good times with the Democrats are over, and we might need to tighten our belt under Republicans. And with that, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator. On the bill, are there anybody? Good Senator from Tamuning, sir, you're recognized.
Sidus Masi, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is no question that the statement from the retiring speaker is absolutely correct. What's currently happening up in GMH in terms of management, and particularly in the last several years with the subsidies that have been granted towards the hospital and the perennial crisis, is not working. Mr. Speaker, this is certainly, the bill has merit in terms of its approach. I know it's not a secret, Mr. Speaker, you and myself and the Health Chair, Senator Mantanani, last Friday met with the governor on this issue and other issues related to budgetary constraints and things that are going on. The governor indicated to us what she's indicated to Senator Lahi, that the committee chair will receive the current review that's underway soon and the recommendations forthwith. And I'm sure the committee chair will disseminate that along with yourself, Mr. Speaker, to all the members of the body. I rise with one key concern in the structure of this proposal, Mr. Speaker. What we know, or what we think, in terms of recommendations that are coming down are probably going to be pretty stark. From what we understand, the individual that has the contract and that's executing the contract through GITA has very extensive professional background in rescuing hospitals, and a particular hospital that has had perennial dire shortfalls and other consequences in terms of his background and experience and why he was contracted. Mr. Speaker, on page 8 in this bill, it enumerates what is contract types, or the contract type. And it lists several outlines that the contract must have as provisions. Where I have a problem, and this is always the no-no, but I'm going to do the no-no in politics, is when we go to page 9, letter C. The provisions of this contract, Mr. Speaker, put the onus on those, the individual, that their company or whoever will get this contract, that they must retain all non-management classified employees. Mr. Speaker, I know that you follow and listen to various media types, talk shows, other, I guess some people would say, entertainment venues for providing news and reviews, particularly engaging in political discussions a lot of times, the government, legislation, and the like. And I say this not because it's my observation. I say this because many in the medical community, particularly outspoken doctors, talk about the staffing issues at GMH. And they talk about it in the context of, we have an example on Guam now, we have a private hospital, GRMC. It may have been in the past a statement that could be argued back and forth and may still be able to be argued back and forth. But the general statement is the employment requirements at the same bed capacity private hospital, GRMC, are at levels that are about half or 55% of what our current hospital has. Now, the retiring speaker mentioned that there are definitely staff shortages in critical areas, clinical, or patient care providing, nurses, doctors, other specialties. But I'm not sure that applies to the other ancillary support for hospital services. Mr. Speaker, I bring this up because I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe that anyone responding to this RFP, when they see this provision, will probably not proceed. Because I don't know how a private company can come in under a PPP and assume the responsibilities of executing a contract and ensuring that we move from the current perennial issues that we have and be bound to all of the classified employees, non-management. I guess that answers the retiring speaker's question too. What do you do with non-management or management? They're not protected here. So I guess it's true, they get to go away. Now, in that same provision on page 9C, it also says that the Department of Administration would facilitate the transfer of classified employees to other employment. That's where I find it kind of contradictory within the same provision, because it looks like the author understands there may be a need to have non-clinical, non-critical staffing that would be absorbed in other government agencies, as is the right of employees, classified government employees, to be transferred to find like positions in order to be able to maintain their status of employment and be absorbed within the government. Mr. Speaker, I know you were there with me. Some people have been asking me about, man, Chris, bad time to become the OFB chair. I said, no, it's okay. We're going to do what we got to do. We signed up for the job. It's our job. But we remember, Mr. Speaker, because we came in 2023 when this government was in shambles. One of my staff right now that helps me was the director of Department of Administration, with the 32-hour work week and all the cuts that we had to do to survive as a government after multiple storms and assuming the reins of the government of Guam under Governor Felix Camacho and Kaleo Moylan. It was a painful, painful time. But I know bumping rights. I know what 32-hour work week looks like. I know the administrative process and the rights of classified employees. But I will tell you that the way this is written, I don't believe that a contractor will, after they read this provision, would proceed without the ability to handle HR. So at this time, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to make an amendment, and you'll probably want it in writing. I'd like to take a recess to basically strike letter C, but maintain the already obvious that Department of Administration has and will facilitate any requirement for employee transfers. Can you take a 1-minute recess?
We'll take a 1-minute recess.